Stan watched his wife Anna glide through the hall in her dazzling dress for half an hour. She skillfully planned her movements so that she would be in the center of the hall when the clock struck 12 at midnight. Surrounded by a rich and smug crowd, she was the object of attention. Everyone wanted to kiss or hug her, especially her insufferably stupid boss, Zach Taylor, heir to the family fortune. It was the third year in a row that the scene had played out at the New Year's Eve company party. The first time he blamed it on the party atmosphere and the champagne. But the second year made it clear that it was no accident, and the third year he began to prepare. Stan Lord looked at the smiling Anna, moving to the beat of the music, and remembered the first years of their marriage, when he was sure that he had met the woman of his dreams. But the first alarm bell sounded a year after the wedding. It was another Christmas corporate party. He remembered watching her standing under the mistletoe with a coworker a little too close. Their laughter, the light touch of her hand on his shoulder. He'd written it off as friendly at the time. She's just an extrovert, she likes to socialize, he convinced himself. But everything changed a year later, when Anna returned from a business trip, overflowing with emotion. She told him how amazing the trip had been, how she had made friends with her colleagues. Stan noticed that her phone began to be blocked more often, and correspondence seemed to be hidden. That's me imagining things, he thought to himself. She loves me. It's just that work has gotten more stressful. These memories ran through his head like a mosaic, forming into one inescapable picture. Why didn't I leave then? Stan thought. He knew the answer. For too long he'd clung to the memories of the woman she once was and hoped she'd become the woman he loved again. But now, looking at her surrounded by smug men, Stan realized that Anna was a thing of the past. His thoughts were interrupted by a hand tugging at his sleeve. Miranda, Anna's best friend and constant companion, stood before him. "Happy New Year, Stan," she said cheerfully and reached up for the traditional kiss. He barely touched her lips and immediately pulled away. Usually her gaze was cocky and self-assured, like someone who knows more than anyone else. But this time he saw something new, sympathy and concern. "Stan, don't take her behavior so personally. It's just New Year's entertainment. Anna will come here soon and show you again how much she loves you," Miranda tried to reassure him. He replied coldly, "Really?" And at Christmas time, apparently she showed her love too, spending the entire evening under the mistletoe with her coworkers? And now here she is doing the same thing, only with other coworkers. By your logic, the more she cuddles and has fun with others, the more she appreciates me? Interesting theory. Miranda tried to justify herself, but his sarcastic tone thwarted her. "Yeah, well, is paying special attention to this Zach, her boss, also a way to show me love? Or is this a new holiday tradition?" Embarrassed, she averted her gaze but continued, "Stan, I can see how hurt you are, but you have to understand." "I understand," he interrupted. "For the first time in 5 years of marriage, I really get it." He stepped back to their table, reached into his suitcase and pulled out a large, brightly wrapped gift. Removing his wedding ring, he attached it to the bow on the box, then held it out to Miranda. "Give this to Anna when she's free. Tell her I wish her everything she deserves in 2025. Happy New Year." "Stan, wait." Miranda grabbed his arm. "I'll get her right away. She just had too much champagne. You have to take her home." "No, Miranda," he replied calmly. "She's staying here. She has a room at this hotel where she's been partying all year while I've been at work. And you know that very well too. She has everything she needs. I'm sure one of her many admirers would love to take care of her." He looked her straight in the eye. "Don't try to lie to me again. You did it last year. I gave her time and she made her choice. Now I've made my choice too. Goodbye, Miranda. I hope not to see you again." He turned and headed for the exit. On the doorstep he spotted Ellen, the HR director with whom he had spent the first half of the day while her boss was in the luxury suite with his wife. He had evidence in his suitcase, photos and videos that would soon go to the chairman of the board of directors. When it was Miranda's turn to hand over the gift, she stopped a few feet away from Anna. Her anxious gaze caught her friend's attention, and she snapped out of the embrace of her boss and lover, Zach Taylor. Anna frowned, noticing the alarm on Miranda's face, but she resolutely held out the brightly wrapped gift. "Stan left this for you," Miranda said in a trembling voice. "He's gone, Anna. He saw you flirting and flirting all night. And when you started kissing men, he handed me this gift and left." Anna grinned, waving her hand. "Oh, come on. Stan always throws his little tantrums if I ignore him a little. I'll come home, apologize, and it'll be business as usual. He loves me, see. Even when he's angry, he leaves me a present. Let's see what it is." "Anna, I don't think it's a present," Miranda started to say, but Anna had already untied the ribbon. When the ring hit the floor, she froze, frowned, and then bent down to pick it up. Zach was quicker. He picked up the ring, smirked, and said, "Is it just me, or is that your husband's wedding ring?" Anna took the ring in confusion, and Miranda whispered, "I tried to warn you." Not paying attention, Anna continued to unwrap the package, revealing a white gift box inside. Smiling, she shook it. "Wow, that's heavy. I wonder what's in there." Carefully cutting the tape, she opened the box and its contents spilled out onto the floor. Glossy photographs scattered all over the room. Anna crouched down to collect them, but as she picked up one of the photos, she froze. Her eyes rounded, and then she screamed exhaustedly. "No." Her scream caught the attention of those around her, and people began to gather around. Miranda, stunned, noticed the look of horror on Zach's face. He grabbed one of the pictures lying on the floor, looked at it, and shouted indignantly, "What the hell?" The place went quiet and everyone started looking at the pictures. They showed Anna and Zach in intimate scenes, as well as Anna with Stan's other co-workers, her bosses and co-workers. Anna, unable to stand, passed out, falling backwards. Her head almost hit the tile floor if it hadn't been for Zach's shoe softening the blow. Miranda rushed to her, supporting her head, slapping her face and repeating, "Anna, wake up. Are you okay?" Meanwhile, the others began to pick up the photographs. One of the women took one look at a picture, turned to her husband and shouted angrily, You scoundrel. I can see why you don't want me." With these words, she hit him in the face with the bag and then kicked him in the groin. He fell down, writhing in pain, and she continued to collect the photos. "Women, if you are married to the managers of Taylor & Son, look here," she announced loudly. "Here are pictures of other husbands with these two cheating women. Let's team up for a divorce, savings on lawyers guaranteed." The other wives joined in the search as the men retreated under their angry stares. "There are thumb drives in here too," announced one of the women, holding up a USB drive. "I wonder what's in there." "You lowlife," shouted the young blonde woman at her husband. "Remember our prenup? I'm going to ruin you." The man tried to justify himself, but the blonde didn't give him a chance, waving the photos threateningly. Eventually the man rushed away. In another part of the hall, a woman was crying, holding a photo in one hand and clutching her chest with the other, her husband crying nearby, covering his face with his hands. The situation in the hall turned chaotic. Conflicts, accusations, and shouting tore up the atmosphere. Each photo became another spark in this fire of emotions. The corporate party turned into chaos. Men and women were confronted with the truth that lay before them on the floor in the form of photographs. One woman, waving the pictures around, shouted, "You said you would never cheat on me because you don't like other women." She blushed, turned sharply and rushed away, swaying dangerously on her high heels. Another woman gathered up some photographs and paced across the room, shouting out names. The woman who approached her took the photo, looked at it, and then turned to her husband with a face full of rage. He began to back away and the wife, waving the photo, moved toward him. Similar scenes were repeated over and over again, filling the hall with angry shouts and accusations. Meanwhile, Anna woke up. She was sitting on the floor, her gaze blank and meaningless. A man in an expensive tuxedo knelt down beside her. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Anna looked at him, not realizing who it was. "Who are you?" she asked. The man handed her a stack of papers, then snapped a picture of her on his phone and announced loudly, "I'm a bailiff. Anna Reynolds Lord, you have been served with papers. This is a copy of Stan Morris Lord's divorce suit with evidence of adultery." He turned to the crowd and continued, "Gentlemen, if you haven't had time to study the photos, they will be part of the public records available online. There you will also find a complete list of all of Mrs. Lord's partners over the past year. For a small fee, I will provide you with a link to a website where you can review these materials. If you're looking for evidence for trial, it's there. Thank you for your attention." The man bowed and departed, leaving a trail of panic and indignation in his wake. Anna, clutching the papers in her lap, looked at her surroundings. Instead of the usual admiration and envy, she saw only contempt, pity, and anger. This realization crushed her. She collapsed onto her friend Miranda's chest and sobbed. At that moment, Zach Taylor, the CEO of the company who was standing nearby, ordered his subordinates to collect the photos and destroy them. He then turned to Ellen, the HR director, who was known for her integrity and professionalism. "I want to see Stan Lord's reprimand on my desk on Monday, with his dismissal papers underneath." Ellen, keeping her composure, replied, "I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor, but Mr. Stan Lord resigned today." He tendered his resignation using the leave of absence you previously approved. I'm not accepting his resignation, Taylor roared. I will fire him never to work in this industry again. I'm afraid that's impossible, sir, Ellen continued. He has already met with the chairman of the board of directors, and your father has accepted his application. Moreover, Mr. Lord has taken a job with one of the companies he consulted with your permission. Taylor's face reddened with rage. His curses against his father and Stan Lord spread throughout the hall while Ellen and her husband, standing nearby, exchanged glances and concealed satisfied smiles. Meanwhile, Stan Lord was leaving New York City in a new Chevrolet High Country Suburban he had specially ordered in the fall. He chose the powerful turbo diesel engine, and the car was delivered to him the same day. The built-in OnStar system showed that it would take a little more than a day to get to his new home in Austin. But Stan was in no hurry. He was going to enjoy the ride, turn off the highways and onto the rural roads so vividly described in John Denver's songs, and visit the small towns of the Carolinas. He dreamed of tasting the local jams, getting to know the residents and starting a new life. Financial matters had been settled in advance. Stan had the foresight to split their bills, but not until after he purchased that $88,000 luxury SUV. He felt it was a fair use of her money, considering how she'd spent 10 times as much as him for years. Under the terms of the divorce, he kept his investments and retirement savings, and Anna could keep their posh penthouse and her trust fund if she signed the papers within 10 days. The car's interior was filled with the sounds of traditional country music from his favorite Sirius XM radio station. Anna hated country music, just as he couldn't stand her favorite old hits. This moment of enjoying his favorite music reminded him that now he was finally free at last. A year ago, at last year's New Year's Eve corporate party, he'd realized it was time to change his life, and he'd been planning everything carefully ever since. Stan smiled at the thought of Taylor and Son. Without his ideas, patents, and design improvements that had brought the company more than half of last year's profits, it was doomed. Things would only get worse under the leadership of the incompetent Zach Taylor. Stan was sure the firm would collapse within 2 years. Perhaps Zach's father, Randolph Taylor, would be able to sell the business, but Zach's reputation as an untalented manager would be ruined. The thought brought Stan considerable satisfaction. Meanwhile, Stan's former boss faced the devastating consequences of the scandal. Zach Taylor sat in his father's office, shoulders slumped and eyes unlifted. Behind the massive oak desk towered Randolph Taylor, a man whose gaze seemed able to burn through. On the table were photographs and printouts of the scandalous materials that had become public. Between them was a copy of Stan Lord's resignation letter. Zach, Randolph's voice was icy, do you realize what you've done? Father, I didn't know it would go this far. Zach tried to justify himself, but his voice sounded weak. You didn't know? Randolph stood up abruptly, his chair sliding back with a clatter. You let our company become a farce. You and your friends made a shambles of it, screwing not only yourself, but the entire business I've spent decades building. It was an isolated incident. Just a mistake. Zach began, but Randolph slapped his hand on the table, interrupting him. A mistake? You call that a mistake? His voice got louder. You've discredited our family name, our reputation. How many years have I spent convincing people of our reliability? And now you think you can just shut that up? Zach tried to say something, but Randolph raised his hand, demanding silence. From now on, you have no right to anything else in this business, he said firmly. You're fired. And not just from the company. I'm severing all financial ties with you. You will receive just enough to keep you from starving. Other than that, you're on your own. But, Father. Zach looked confused and depressed. You can't. I can and I will, Randolph cut him off. Get out of my office. You're nothing to me anymore. Zach stood up shakily. He realized it was over. Without his father's support, without his influence, he was nothing. As the door slammed shut behind him, Randolph sat back down at his desk and closed his eyes for a second, allowing himself to relax. Ellen, he called out, and the woman waiting outside entered the office. Start the rebuilding process. Find the best people. I want us to have a new plan by the end of the week. I'll get right on it, sir, she nodded. Randolph looked at the papers in front of him and shook his head. It was the end of his son's era. But for the company it might have been a fresh start. Randolph fired all the executives whose names had come up in the investigation and personally took control of the company, and appointed Ellen as vice president of recruitment and talent development. Her job was to recruit top talent to rebuild the company's reputation. Meanwhile, Anna returned to their penthouse, accompanied by Miranda and her husband Albert. Miranda had always been close to Anna, sharing her amusement, while Albert, a successful businessman, had long since put up with her cheating. He had not only turned a blind eye to it, but had learned to live with it, justifying himself by saying that their marriage was just a convenient partnership. Albert felt that meddling in Miranda's affairs was a waste of time, so he silently supported his wife even in this awkward moment. When Anna crossed the threshold of the penthouse, she was overcome with despair. All of Stan's belongings were gone, and the emptiness of their home seemed to emphasize her loneliness. On the way home, she tried to come up with excuses. Her cheating was supposedly harmless, just a way to have fun or influence decisions she thought might benefit their marriage. But even to herself, her arguments sounded absurd. She knew Stan would not accept these explanations. Sitting down on the floor, Anna burst into tears. She cursed her stupidity and self-confidence. Everything she'd thought was hers, marriage, reputation, status, had crumbled overnight. For 3 years she had skillfully concealed her actions, confident that Stan would never suspect a thing. But he had shattered her illusions, leaving her all alone. Meanwhile, Stan moved steadily south, leaving the past behind. Before leaving, he had deleted the SIM card from his old phone and thrown it into the snow so that no one could interrupt his journey. Now he was completely free to focus on his new beginning. The week on the road flew by quickly, but for Stan it was the beginning of a long-awaited life where he was the master of his own destiny. Stan drove through sunny Texas, smiling as the memories of his recent actions entertained him. Throughout the week, the letters he had sent with evidence of infidelity had destroyed marriage after marriage. Each letter was carefully crafted, personalized, and accompanied by an attachment that was enough to cause real relationship fires. One of those letters, sent yesterday to Albert, Miranda's husband, made Stan smile especially wide. It was a precise hit on target. Instead of reacting with hurt or jealousy, however, Albert had merely accepted this aspect of their marriage with indifference. To him, it had become part of their arrangement, a union for convenience's sake. But when he received a letter from Stan containing videotapes and a conversation between Miranda and Anna in which they discussed their lovers with smiles and ridiculed naive husbands, Albert decided to act. His indifference turned into cold calculation. Albert sent copies of these conversations to the wives of all the men mentioned in the tapes, if he knew their names. This was his peculiar retaliation. He wanted to destroy not only his own sham marriage, but the marriage of every man involved in this network of cheating. In New York, the epidemic of exposure was growing rapidly. Miranda and Anna were now living together in Anna's penthouse since Albert had kicked his wife out of the house after seeing the video. The women sat on the couch, their faces tense. The consequences of their actions were beginning to unfold with disastrous speed, but they hadn't yet realized the full extent of it. Stan, meanwhile, was approaching Austin. He crossed Lady Bird Lake, drove past the convention center, and headed toward the modern apartment complex where his new company had given him an apartment. The lease was paid for 6 months, giving him plenty of time to find his dream home with a spacious lot and trees. Stan dreamed of getting a dog and starting to look for a new life partner, a woman who would be honest, loving, and willing to build a home and family. His new partners had already organized a barbecue to introduce Stan as a recently divorced man. They promised there would be plenty of women interested in dating at the event. Meanwhile, in New York, the chaos continued to escalate. Wives who had received letters from Albert shared their stories with other victims, drawing more and more people into the maelstrom. Ellen, who continued to keep Stan in the loop, kept him informed of the growing firestorm of disclosures. The more he heard about the aftermath, the more glad he was to have left that life behind. Stan smiled as he imagined old ties and lies crumbling while he built his new life. His past remained in New York and the future was opening up for him in Texas, full of opportunity and freedom. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.